Well, I'm Ms. House, Superintendent, and we're so excited to do these schoolhouse meetings. We started one in the fall and we did it on curriculum, and this one now is kind of on social emotional issues, and it's called parent agility. So I'll explain in a minute, but let's start with prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you so much for the seasons. Lord, even the snow today and then the sun coming out, and just so many things that remind us of your power and your glory. We thank you so much for the safety in traveling here tonight. Just ask you to give us a great time. Help us to learn, help us to ask the questions that we have. Lord, we just ask you to help us to grow together as a family, and for these parents to just learn a little bit more and get a little more confidence in parenting their children, Lord, and growing these kids up to be young men and women of God. Lord, thanks for your blessings in your name. Amen. Well, we decided, when I was thinking through what do we want to do for our next schoolhouse meeting, there have been so many things that have come up. I mean, of course, things in the news and the Sandy Hook shooting and all these emotional issues. But if you have a child in your home, whether your child is 6 or 16, you know that issues just pop up. Things maybe we never experienced as kids, or things you weren't expecting or didn't want to happen. And how do you deal with that? Well, as a school, we're here, we're trained to educate your kids. And we want to do that in every aspect, but we're not trained to deal with every social emotional issue. So we get help. We get a lot of help. Dr. Doug McKinley from Family Care, Associates in Family Care,
well
here
done.
in Aurora and Naperville, I believe, has been working with our teachers for a couple of years, working on team building. He actually, counselors from his practice have come and supported our students after chapels and things that we thought might be especially emotional. So they really have been a support to Aurora Christian, and even a personal support to me. If I have a question or a need, I call up Doug. So we thought he would be a great person. He relates really well. He'll answer questions. He'll talk for a while, but then he'll open it up to questions. Thought he should come along. So when we were talking, Mr. Etchison and I talked to him originally about this and said, here's these things we want to talk about. He said, well, it's really hard to talk about every specific issue, but how about parent agility? And he'll talk to you about that. He trains on leader agility, I believe, and he'll explain that. But it's kind of an exciting topic, I think. And there's some theory, a lot of theory you'll hear, but we're gonna open it up time for questions too if you need. So I just want to introduce to you Dr. Doug McKinley.
Thanks. Well, that light is right there. Do I need to be there for the video? Okay, so you're out here on a Tuesday evening, is that right? I'm not sure why you came. I'm not sure what you're looking for, but you do? Okay. Can you just send it to me, right through your, like telegraphically? Well, that's a phone, isn't it? Psychopathically? Oh, that's a different word. I think being a parent is incredibly challenging. Does anybody agree? So I would assume that most of you have children that would bring you here. I have a 21-year-old who's a senior at Olivet Nazarene University, and I have a 19-year-old who's a freshman at Olivet Nazarene University. So part of what I'm going to talk to you about is my training, and part of it is actually real experience. What a novel idea, right? I did parenting classes for after I got my doctorate degree, for about 3 or 4 years before Jane and I started having kids. And it was just the funniest thing, because people would always ask me, well, Dr. McKinley, do you have any kids? And I'd say, no. And they'd like, come talk to me after you've had kids. Then I'll listen to you. And it's funny because early on, I did teach from principles and from my training. And I hoped that I would tell parents, look, I hope what I'm saying, that the principles are universal and they're true. And so I'm going to speak confidently with you, and I worked with a lot of families back before I had kids, and the only difference is now that I've gone through that gauntlet is I think I'd be a little bit more patient. You know what I'm saying? I think I would go back, I'd like to go back to those parents and say, you know, what I taught you was right, but I was way too hard on you. I was way too arrogant to think that it's just easy to apply. And I think that's probably my biggest lesson, is I talk to my kids and interact with them in some of the tools that I'm going to be teaching tonight. it occurs to me they haven't read the same books that I've read, right? And they don't really care. In fact, my son, I think he should be an attorney because he can just debate with me as good as anybody. And being the son of a psychologist, just picture that, right? So you're growing up and everything is, boy, you just normal, everybody's average, everybody's the same, you know, equality, and you teach all those principles. So, well, the first time he brought a C home from school, you know, we're like, what's going on with this C? And he goes, Dad, you told me average is good, so I'm average. Right? That was what I had to deal with. You all have your own challenges. And this idea about parenting and doing it well is really the first thing I want to talk to you about is it really isn't a new craft. And I told one of my friends, John Bell, who's a pastor of Grace Point over in Naperville, we were talking recently about the Bible and the ancient scriptures, and I said, John, you know, I tell people all the time the best psychology book you'll ever read is the scriptures. And he was so excited to hear that, you know, a pastor talking to a psychologist. Absolutely. There is nothing that you cannot find in terms of modern day challenges in the parenting life that you cannot find in the teachings of Jesus. And so whatever I say tonight, please make that your primary source of information, not a clinical psychologist. Yes, we spend our day job talking through some of these things and trying to share with people. That's true. We spend most of our time, and if you spent the time that I did helping families and helping people think through and sort out kids' lives, you would have the same amount of knowledge I would have, and many of you would have more. And so I'm here as a content expert, a subject matter expert, but really my expertise comes as the Spirit fills me with wisdom. My training, the human side of the training, I try to partner that with what He teaches me and then translates it into action and activity with my kids. So I can't help but start with a scripture, and I don't have it on my computer's usually right here, so I'm going to have to turn and read it. This really impressed me many years ago, this idea, and the Apostle Paul was writing to the city of Corinth, and he was struggling with how to connect with them and how to encourage them through suffering and trials. And he wrote this in the 2 Corinthians chapter 2, and he says, "You yourselves are our letter, written on our hearts, known and read by everyone. You show that you are a letter from Christ, the result of our ministry, written not with ink, but with the Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of stone, but on tablets of human hearts. Such confidence we have through Christ before God, not that we have competent in ourselves to claim anything for ourselves, but our competence comes from God. He has made us competent as ministers of a new covenant, not a letter, but the Spirit. For the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life." What a better way to start this evening than just to remind ourselves that the rules of parenting are not the main thing. The rules of parenting, the way we parent through the letter of the law, is just an objective. It's not the spirit of what you're trying to do. And in fact, the best gift you can give your kids is to write a letter on their hearts. That's a different kind of parenting approach. What does that look like? How do you impact the heart of your children? Well, it doesn't happen through traditional outside-in kind of telling and instructing. It's a different way of approaching it. It's a different way of thinking. And that's what's really led me to this concept, this idea called parent agility. And I'll try to explain the concept, and I think it gives you a picture of a way to think about your role differently. And some of us were brought up, depending on your family of origin, some of us were brought up with very rigid parents that had rules and policies that everybody followed. Some of us were brought up in the opposite, where there were no expectations and everybody did what they wanted, and then many variations in between. And I think it's important for you to realize that has influenced how you approach this role of parent. Unless you've been to a parenting class, most of us parent based on our experiences as being a child. It's kind of scary. So It's kind of scary, and a lot of people don't spend the time to come out to a workshop like this to learn how to do this better. They think because they are parents, they know how to parent. And it's a big mistake. And I applaud each of you for investing a little bit of your time this evening. And my promise to you is that I will give you my best thinking. I've prepared for this. I know what God wants me to share with you. Your job is to let it sink in a way that you can do something really magnificent with the work of the Holy Spirit in your family and your kids. But you got to be willing to be open-minded. So this is a different way of thinking about this. So one of the things that we're hearing is that because of the changes in our economy, the changes in our world, what's happening is we're hearing our kids tell us that, Mom, Dad, you don't understand how tough it is. You hearing that? You don't understand. My kids told me the same thing. It's crazy. And so one day I just got curious and I asked my daughter, what do you think is the biggest difference from your perspective at 12 or 13 or whatever she was, and from your generation and when I grew up? Have you ever done that? Just ask them. It's pretty funny. And she was on her game that day. She turned to me and she said technology. And I went, ooh, that's a good point. Technology has radically changed the way our kids come up through their social, emotional learning systems. Is everybody with me? Big difference. Yes, all of the problems, these are very common things. Depression, anxiety, has that been around? We didn't know what to call it back when I grew up. I was born in 1962. I'm a cusper. I'm right between the baby boomers and the Gen Xers, right in that age, 62 to 65. Is when the Gen Xers begin. And we didn't know what it was called back then, but I know when my mom struggled with depression, she went and talked to people, and she was considered to be having a mental breakdown. You remember that phrase? She's having a nervous breakdown. That's what they called it back then. Us kids just thought, cool, free reign, Mom's gone, right? She's not home tonight. And so depression and anxiety has been around. We didn't know what to call it. This self-injury thing has grown like wildfire. This Marilyn Manson character about 15 years ago, when he hit the music scene and started making self-injurious behavior a popular social norm, has caused all kinds of grief. Drugs and alcohol abuse, been around forever. Sexual acting out, one of the oldest signs of rebellion and trying to understand. Eating disorders probably was always around, but it's definitely surged in terms of its impact on our kids' lives, and the whole idea around body image and how do I feel about myself, big problem. And then behavioral disorders of all types. So my question for you is, what is the main difference between Christian and non-Christian kids and how they face these struggles? Does anybody know? What does the research say? Does anybody know? It's the same with divorce statistics. It's the same with emotional, social problems, diagnosis, treatment. And is that a challenging issue in Christendom? It is, because we claim that when the Spirit fills our life, we claim that our life is different because we give it away. And we claim that we're running our families differently, and we claim that it's impacting differently. It's very challenging to me. It's alarming to me. But the reality is that our kids are going through the same struggles that all kids are having, and this is true even in private schools like ACS. And I've interacted, as Colette said, I've interacted with the teachers for over the last several years, and we've taken emergent calls to help guide them. These problems exist in even sort of isolated situations like this, proportionally at the same rate. So the reality is, we can just, as Christ followers, we can just say, that doesn't happen to Christians, and just pray it away, or we can get serious about how are we going to approach these real challenges that our kids are facing. And my guess is that the courage in this room is pretty high, because you've stepped out tonight and you've been willing to be transparent and vulnerable and say, I need to learn, and let me hear what I can learn tonight. So Let me just tee up this idea of agility. Often, if you think about it, it comes from the sports metaphor and the sports analogy. And in the definition, it's general. It's defined as the ability of a system, and I'm saying or a person, to rapidly respond to change by adapting its initial stable configuration. Means that we're able to adjust in a moment's notice to whatever the situation is creating or demanding us. In fact, I asked the camera person, where should I stand so this video is usable? And she goes, I'll follow you around everywhere. I'm like, cool. You know? And what if we really understood that this level of agility is required due to the demands of our current culture and the struggles that we're facing? So here's the definition that there's no book on this. The only thing that's out there is there's research now on leadership agility that me and my consultants are doing a lot of work around, working with corporate executive and leadership teams around this idea. And here's the word. Does this relate to any of you parents? We need to learn how to lead and navigate through ambiguity. That's what I'm asking. That's what we're getting requested to do. Does that relate to any of you parents? Ambiguity, uncertainty, what's unknown. And so this is one of the greatest challenges that faces our leaders, and in our corporate consulting, we're now doing workshops around this concept called leadership agility. So when Colette called me last fall and we were talking through this, I'm like, you know, maybe we need to bring this idea to the parenting world. And I talked it over with some of our therapists at Associates Family Care, and they're like, that's what we do all the time. That's what we do, is we help create a parent agility paradigm so that we can begin to be more flexible in what we do. So this is the definition. I added a sentence at the end of it, so on one of your handouts I have it, and I didn't complete it, but I kept looking at it last night and I like this better. It's the ability of a parent to rapidly respond to change by adapting their initial approach to what the situation requires for the kids to be honored without enabling them. Wouldn't that be nice? Would you like to be a parent that can rapidly respond to the changing situation? And I think this is really your highest calling at this point. Now I realize we probably have some parents from the preschool age and the middle school and all the way up into high school. But let me tell you, preschool parents, any of you in here? Raise your hands. All right? Are things rapidly changing on you? It's unbelievable. That time, I remember it well. That time is just crazy. Kids are doing all kinds of things, and you're constantly having to adapt to what the challenges they're giving you. These little, these little 1.5 foot creatures that run around and make your life crazy sometimes. And then as they move into middle school and elementary school and middle school, I found that raising a daughter, going through that junior high era, frightening. What's wrong with you women? You're crazy people. My son went through junior high, no problem. A bully was messing with him. They got in a fight. He got kicked out for 2 days, and then they were friends afterwards the next week. What's wrong with you girls? But my daughter went into 6th grade over here at not Jewel, but the other one over there, Herget, thank you. And she came home crying every day. I mean, it was incredible. Mean-spirited, tough. It's no wonder you women have issues. It's like you went through junior high school. And it's just challenging. And so those middle school years, difficult. Then you get into high school, and we all know, many of you probably are here with high school kids, we all know the challenges that they're facing. The real, serious stuff. And so this idea that we're just going to sort of parent the way we want to. We're just going to create our script, and we're going to run, it's just going to run its course. We're going to parent, we're going to be the leader, and the kids are just going to fall into place. It doesn't work. Who's telling you that it does? It doesn't work. It doesn't work for the parents that we work with. It didn't work for me, and the scriptures tell us that it doesn't work. It's telling you don't live by the letter of the law, but write in their hearts, not with ink, but in their hearts. And what you want is you want kids that have a connection to you as parents that will live their life known that they were loved. Have you ever met somebody that doesn't feel loved? And they come to you and they look you right in the eye and I don't feel loved. When I see a young kid and tears in their eyes and they say, my parents don't love me, I don't feel loved, it's one of the saddest realities. Now sometimes it's not true, right? Some of your kids maybe have said that. You don't love me. It's the greatest way for a kid to get revenge is to tell them, you don't love me, mommy. You don't love me, daddy. It's a very powerful technique. But when you really sit across from somebody that does not experience consistently feeling loved and appreciated, it's a sad, empty space. And I can't relate to it. My parents loved me. My dad had a lot of mistakes and did a lot of things, but he loved me. I knew, he wrote on my heart that I was worth breathing and walking on the planet. And when I got the challenge of being a parent, that was the most important thing to me. And here's the principle that kept me going through all that time. It's very simple. Rules without a relationship leads to rebellion. Rules without a relationship leads to rebellion. It's not on the slideshow, it's not on the handout. You need to create a relationship with your children that imprints on their heart that they're loved. And it's not love of a parent, it's love of God. We can't give away, people, what we don't have. And if you're trying to love your children through the emptiness of humanism and through striving for perfection, you're going to end up with kids not feeling loved. Because you and I are not good enough to love our kids without His help. We aren't. You think you do. You have emotion. You feel for them. But it's only when we receive the gift of love that we can actually give the gift of love. And so this is a big deal. Let me give you some pictures, some images. Think about agility this way. Remember those old saws that we would use? Does anybody know what that one on the right is? What's that called? A Sawzall. This is the coolest tool at Home Depot, I'm telling you. This thing, you can take it and just punch a hole in the wall and you can cut a circle hole right out of your wall in your living room. Guys love it. We're like, I want one of those. Because it's got a rotating blade that can go this way and this way. It's a very agile tool. It can be used for almost anything. That old standard, this kind of sawing back and forth, and even the circular saws, they're only useful for certain types of angles. This one is a game changer. You can take this almost anywhere. You can cut almost anything with it. It's a very agile tool. Another example. I was thinking of a story that a family I worked with kids who had one of these rope ladders, and when they'd go up to the room at night and say, "Good night, Mom, good night, Dad," they'd throw the rope ladder out the window, and out they went. Our kids are more agile than we are. Think about that. When your kids are more creative than you are in terms of setting limits, they got rope ladders to get out of their room at night, to get away from your rules, and to find their own voice, and to be rebellious in their own way. When I grew up, I just jumped out the window. I don't know, these kids are smarter than me, right? You just find your own way out. All right, so the first handout you have, I want to explain this to you. It's pretty cool stuff, but you got to stay with me here. It's this idea that one of the biggest problems we have as parents is we try to treat adaptive challenges like technical problems. And so what I'd like to do is just define the difference between a technical problem and an adaptive challenge so that you understand when it's time to put the saw down and get the sawzall out. When it's time to shift out of just telling your kids, instructing them what they need to do, and shift into this concept that I'm practicing at called parent agility. And so in your handout, you have a list of different things. In fact, I need a copy of one. Does anybody have an extra one? I can grab one. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. You're going to share with your lovely wife there. So if you look on the... Oh, it's not this one. It's the other handout. Thanks, buddy. That was really good. Way to set me up. Oh, you got them on front and back. I thought that was pretty funny, though, if you did that on purpose. All right, so Aurora Christian School, they're frugal. They make sure to use two-sided paper. That's for you parents because they want to take good care of the money that you're investing. That was a commercial. I don't need any extra pay for that. So on the left-hand side, we have what we're calling technical problems. The technical problems, these are easy to identify, often lead to quick and easy cut-dried solutions, can be solved by an authority person or expert. Dad, I need the keys to the car. It's a technical problem, right? How do we get you the car? What do you need to do? How do you learn how to drive? It's a teaching opportunity. I don't have the right tools for my school project. Can you help me? Technical problem, which requires a technical response. We love these kinds of opportunities, especially men. Men are left-brained most of the time. We like things to be nice and clean, black and white, A to Z, just boom, boom, boom. Give me a script, I'll follow it, we'll take it out, we'll knock it out. But the problem is sometimes with our kids, they bring us adaptive challenges that require us to stop, and we have to do this really painful thing. It's called thinking. You know, when you have to think, it's like, oh, I have to think? Yeah. We got an adaptive challenge. People are generally receptive to technical solutions. You know you're in a technical problem when you're giving suggestions and your kid's going, great, thanks, appreciate it, and things move along. They can be easily implemented. But on that right-hand side is more what we would call adaptive challenges. Difficult to identify, easy to deny. What's going on with you, son? I notice that you're just not yourself these days. What do kids say? Nothing. I don't know. You know they know, but they're not going to tell you. So you ask them more questions. Tell me. Really, son? Whatever, right? You know you're in an adaptive situation because you can't put your finger on it. Sometimes they don't know. Sometimes they struggle. Adaptive challenges requires changes in values, beliefs, roles, relationships, and approaches to the work, to the role of parenting. When you're in an adaptive challenge, if your child is more adaptive than you are, you're at a complete disadvantage and you're of no use to them. And a lot of parents stop and get really rigid. That's all I know, that's all I got. I hear stories of parents, they pound walls, they walk away, they scream, you know. They don't have any idea what their kids are going because they're more adaptive than you are. They're having to accommodate your style. And what they figured is the way to defeat you is to not talk to you. And it's a very painful thing, and kids know this. And so they defeat you because they're more flexible than you are. It's the same thing in the teaching. Teachers have the same challenge in the classroom. Number 4, it requires changes in numerous situations, usually across family boundaries. Whereas a technical problem, it's just usually in the family. Right here, we can usually have all the resources we need. Sometimes we have to go outside the family. It goes outside the family boundaries, and we got to call in for help. Number 5, people often resist even acknowledging adaptive challenges. And number 6, solutions, listen to this, they require experiments and new discoveries. They can take a long time to implement and cannot be implemented by edict. So, what are some of the adaptive challenges that kids are coming up with? You know, let's talk just simply at the preschool level. Everything they're doing, the little guys are just adapting to a new world. You know, the psychologist Alfred Adler said that everything that children do is they're striving from inferiority. They're overcoming their sense of inferiority. They're these little creatures and everything is big. And they're just trying to understand. They're trying to find their mastery. And so everything for them is adaptive. And if parents are just, during those early years, it does require more structure. One of the biggest mistakes parents make with younger children is they become too adaptive. I was one of those parents. I don't know about you. I worked evenings during those years. And my wife would have the kids in bed at like 6:30 or 7, you know, when they were real young. And I'm like, wake them up. I want to play with them. It's 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. Do any guys relate to this? You with me? Wake them up. You know, I want to see my son. And my wife's like, no, they need structure. And I'm like, what a cruel mother you are. You know, I'd walk away. Oh my word, am I happy, right? She knew the structure of the early years was extremely important. And when you try to become too accommodating during those early years, too adaptive, then the kids begin to rule the house. I had many families come over the years and tell me that their 6-year-old was running their family. You know anybody like that? 6-year-olds do run families, if you let them. So creating structure and being quicker in your thinking, getting ahead of where they're going. You can usually predict what those young guys are going to do very early on. Middle school, it starts to become more challenging because as you put them on that yellow bus and they go to school and they have all the social interactions. It was one of the saddest days of my life when I put my 5-year-old on that yellow bus. Is everybody with me on that? Because I knew what was going to happen. I knew that people were going to tease him, were going to make fun of him, and sure enough, within a couple of weeks, he comes home crying, you know, what's wrong? You know, the kid on the bus took my lunch, and then they threw it back and forth, all that stuff. It's challenging out there. And then as they get into high school, boy, it just seems like they struggle. I mean, these kids are, at a very early age, having to make decisions about, am I going to have sex? Am I going to smoke pot? Am I going to cut myself if I don't like what people are doing to me? Very, very young. You know, I don't know. I guess when I was that age, I would just go out and go for a run. You know, I just had different coping mechanisms. But it seems like these kids just don't have those kinds of coping mechanisms that come natural to them. And it's our job to be in that space with them and think adaptively. So I guess the point here is that I want you to, and this doesn't include all of them. One example is taking medication to lower blood pressure, or adaptive challenge, change lifestyle to eat healthy and get more exercise. Try to teach that to a teenager, right? You got pizza or you got vegetables, right? It's just, I mean, try to teach it to me. It's hard enough, it's alone to that age group. It's an adaptive challenge. And parents have to quit trying to solve it technically and start getting into the relationship with the kids and getting messy. Thinking in the role and being adaptive in how you handle it. Every kid is different. I was talking to one of my coaching clients today. He's an executive at a hospital, and he's like, I have 4 kids, and none of them are the same. It's the most amazing thing, Doug. He said, you wonder, it seems like I parented them all the same, but they all come out different. And I go, it's fascinating. The human experience is so adaptive, and we're so unique that one script, one way of being a parent isn't going to be good enough. It's not, and it's going to be challenging. And even when you're adaptive, your kids are going to have a mind of their own and do things for their reasons, not for your reasons. It's probably one of the biggest challenges as parents that we have to accept, is that they're motivated for different things than you are. All right, so the next one, the other handout on the other side of this page, thanks Kevin, is this idea of levels of agility in your parenting approach. And this is the theoretical part that Colette was talking about. I apologize, but for me, I have a simple principle that I follow. If you get it, but you don't believe it, you're not going to do it. So my first job tonight is I'm trying to bring some awareness. Do you even get it? Some of you are sitting in here and you're going, Doug doesn't understand my family, that I don't get it. I don't relate to anything you're saying. And you're missing a golden opportunity to learn. These kids are struggling with some of the stuff that you don't believe they are. So you don't even get it. Some of you are just here to get it. That's your first step in creating an opportunity for change in your life. But if those of you are following me and you're like, this makes good sense, my next goal is I need to help you believe it. And if you don't believe it, you're not going to do it. You're going to leave here tonight and you're going to go, that guy was kind of interesting or whatever, but you're not going to make any changes. None. Zero. In fact, the research tells us after you leave a talk like this, if you don't apply something within 24 hours, you're going to lose 85% of it. I'm hoping you'll leave here tonight and you'll do something different with your conversation before your kids go to bed. Then you start applying how you think differently. So we're going to talk about these 3 different roles that I came up with of agility and what you're comfortable with. So get it, and then believe it, and then maybe you'll actually do something differently. So the first one is what we're calling role-based. And role-based is this idea, some of you actually believe because you're older and you are biologically their parent, your kids should do what you tell them to do. Don't admit it. Don't raise your hand, because that's really, you're going to look really silly in an educated group like this. But some of you still believe it. I know you do. because I talk to you every day. This is a really big mistake, people. It's the same thing that leaders do in organizations. Think of your boss. Think of the best boss that you ever worked for. Was that somebody that just told you what to do and you were expected to do it? No. That was somebody that understood you, that understood that you were a part of a chess game, not checkers. That you were different, you were unique, and they understood your unique differences and they drew that out of you. Same thing in the parenting relationship. If you're just defining yourself as parent because I'm dad and I say so, then when it comes to technical problems, no problem. And if your kids grow up in sort of this perfect world where everything's black and white, then things will go very smoothly. And I have 2 children, and one of them is like a cactus. She could grow anywhere. She doesn't need a lot of water, she doesn't need a lot, and the other one is high maintenance. Anybody have kids like that? Right? I don't understand it, but they're different, and we're gardeners, and you have to learn how to create the soil and the environment for what that kid needs. Some need a lot of light. Some need not so much light. Some too much light creates problems for them. Some need a ton of water, and some need very little water. You have to understand what the environment is and give them the surroundings and environment so that they can grow naturally as God designed them to be. So just being a role-based parent is not going to be enough. You're just going to stand there, and your kids are going to go through these adaptive challenges, and you're not going to be there to meet them. You're going to be insufficient to assist them during the most difficult times of their life. Now, as an adult, I've talked to many of you about the disappointment of your parents missing when they needed you most. And yet now you're parenting kids and you're making those same mistakes that your parents did. Do you get it? Do you believe it? Are you willing to do something different? That's what this is about tonight. Are you willing to think differently about how you're approaching adaptive challenges versus technical problems in your family? The second one is results-based. Some of you are pretty strategic and you've got this figured out and you kind of look at it logically and you're like, you believe that parents motivate kids by making it challenging and satisfying to contribute to the family values and plans. And so you're getting them engaged, you're kind of putting your game plan up there and saying, everybody that's in, this will be a great family, just follow my rules. So you move out of that role-based things and you're all about results. And when the kids bring home the right grades and when they dress the right way and they create the right impression for you, then it creates a win-win scenario and everybody's happy. And maybe child 1 does that, maybe child 2 does that. What about child 3? And then I have friends who have 8 children. Anybody like that? 8 children, they're my age. 8 children. I'm like, wow. So child 1, 2, and 3 are raising 6, 7, and 8. You know how that goes, right? Anybody from a family of 8? 7? Yeah, 1. Is that right? Which one were you?
I'm 7.
7. So you were raised by 1 and 2, right? Or somebody up there. Were they really? Good for them. I really feel sad for you that you're a Green Bay Packer fan, though. They did something clearly wrong. Yeah, they did clearly something wrong in their parenting. They treated that as a technical problem, not an adaptive challenge. All right, reality-based is, listen to this. Visionary and facilitative. They believe that parents are to instill hope and possibilities within their hearts and minds of kids. Parents empower kids and actively facilitate their development. What parent doesn't want to be that parent, right? That sounds like, oh yeah, sign me up for that. It's a different way of thinking about your role. Here's the deal. If you want to get an immediate need met, then you will insist that they comply. But do you just want children that comply to your rules, or do you want children that you create an environment where they are cultivated a growing, dynamic environment where they have their own voice? And many of you, if you're honest, would say, I want the first one. I just want them to do what I need them to do because I'm tired, right? Just be honest, it's true. I'm tired, Doug, and I was talking to another one of my leaders today at the same hospital, and she said to me, she goes, she has a strong Polish accent, she goes, it's just easier. It's just easier. And she's doing the same thing with her employees in the job. She's not handling the adaptive challenges, she's struggling, and so now they've asked me to come in and help her. And it was interesting for me to connect the dots for her in the way she raised her kids and the way she's leading her organization. Same style. because it was too difficult. It was too hard to get in and get messy with people and understand the adaptive challenges they go through. So those are the three different levels of parenting, if you will, that kind of set us up for this idea. And I want to give you some tools now. So we'll jump into this Parent Agility Compass. I don't have a handout for it. I'm still working through the logistics of this, and I'm borrowing material from a book called Leadership Agility. Some guys are doing some research on this, and so I'm borrowing these concepts, and I'm thinking that this is really going to be a useful toolkit for parents, and I want to give you these 4 things. So this is worth writing down. The first one is this idea of context setting agility. And if you, again, what's the definition of agility? It's being able to rapidly respond to changing environments of your initial approach. You already have an idea, when you go home tonight, you're getting your car, you're going to go home, you have an idea how you want the evening to go. But are you flexible enough, are you agile enough to adapt to what actually happens? And so these are 4 tools that you can think about and ways in which you need to approach this idea if it's of any interest to you. So the first one is this context setting agility. And these are parents that sort of, they have the ability to step back and understand what the situation is, what's going on in the situation. And I'm thinking of a typical scenario with a family where I was talking to somebody not too long ago where the 16-year-old son was playing video games and had been on it like 3 hours, and the father wanted that to stop and to get homework done, right? Nothing unusual. But what escalated, what happened is, we approached the video game conversation, the son challenged, the father started screaming. Before long, they're rolling around on the floor, throwing punches, a door got broken, and blood came out of one of them's nose. You want to guess which one? It wasn't the kid, right? So they bring this scenario to me, and I'm like, what are you thinking? Do you understand that you can't get in a fight with your child? But Dr. McKinley, this bravado, This gentleman he didn't have this ability to have context setting agility. He couldn't step back and remind himself, what's the point? What is the purpose of parenting? And he had no situational awareness of what was happening. And his wife was there during the whole time. And if you've ever witnessed this, ladies or men, it's frightening when this kind of thing happens. And he was within just one hair of losing that kid and potentially even being arrested, right? You can't get physical with your kids in this generation. In this era, it's a big problem. But he just couldn't, it's kind of like that zoom lens, he just couldn't zoom out and look at what's going on and lead himself in that conversation. He had to get his way. Now the kid was wrong too, obviously. Really angry kid, frustrated, but because the kid decided to take on the parent, and the parent didn't have this ability to kind of pull back and say, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to get in a rolling, fighting match with my own son. They lacked this tool. They weren't agile enough to lead through that situation. And I know that each of you have either seen this or been faced with it yourselves. When my son was around that 13 to 14 year time frame, he got that attitude going, and I remember looking right at him and thinking, I understand why parents beat kids. I really do. I'm like, makes perfect sense to me right now. And I'm sitting there going, jail, I'm going to beat your face. I remember saying it loud. Is anybody with me? No, I didn't do it. Don't worry. But it was it was close to an option for me. Because I didn't have the ability, the context setting agility. I was not agile in that moment. I was mad. I was mortified that my son at 13 would look in my eye and tell me defiantly, no. Right? I would never do that to my dad. Have you ever heard that? I walked 12 miles in the snow to school. I would never do that to my dad. So I understand, but what that is the inability for you to pull back and understand the context of which you're entering. Some call it meta-analysis. You pull back. Another technique we call it is thinking of yourself as a spectator of what you're doing. get in the stands and watch yourself on the arena of the parenting field and see and ask yourself, how am I doing? Am I good with this movie? Am I playing the character of parent that I want to? And some of you would be like, oh my gosh, I'm a drama queen, you know? Or I don't know, what's the male version of that? Whatever drama queen looks like for men. I'm an angry guy. And that context setting agility allows you, think of it as just a zoom lens to zoom out and for a moment, in a moment's notice, just say, I'm not going to go here. I'm just not going to. This happened to me in a men's Christian basketball league right over here at Eola Pritchard Center or whatever that is down there. I was playing basketball and this guy, he and I just kept banging on each other. And I'm like 40 years old. I'm 50 now. 40 years old. I'm playing basketball. I think my son was actually over there that night. And he took me and just threw me into the stands. I mean, literally, he was a big dude. He just took me and threw me in the stands. I came out of the stands just like this, and I was like, I was going to throw myself on this guy at 40 years old. And I'm like, I got to this point. First of all, I looked at him and I thought, I'm going to get killed. This is not a fair fight. It's David and Goliath, and I have no stones. So I just remembered this very vivid moment where I said to myself, are you going to be that guy? Do you know what I'm saying? Are you going to be that guy? He did. He threw me in the stands. It was horrible. You know, it was a bad deal. It was a bad play. And my friends, you know, I had one of my friends who was starting to mess with this guy, trying to get him off my back. And it was just funny. But you have moments in life, defining moments, when you have to stop yourself and say, really? Am I going to be that guy or that woman? And say, no, I'm not. I'm going to step back. Then you got relational agility. This is a very difficult thing. What I find with parents that struggle with kids is that they are constantly hiding and protecting the family laundry, right? The dirty laundry. And it's a big mistake because what we're doing is we're not engaging the stakeholders. So some of us as parents, even in our own marriage, if you're fortunate enough to be in a husband and wife, two-parent family where you're raising kids, what a blessing. Single parents have among the most difficult, challenging job on the planet. So hard. I think it was difficult with my wife, and we have a really good connection. We have a very good, growing marriage relationship. It was very challenging, but when you're doing it alone, very challenging. Even amongst marriages, parents handle kids themselves. They don't engage the stakeholders, the other key people in this relationship. What do you think we should do? They don't call up friends. They don't seek counsel. They don't create a community through which they make these decisions. And decisions then become secrets. And when you hide things, when they're in the darkness, then bad things happen. Read 1 John. You need to bring that out into the light, and let's talk about it. There's some real psychology in the scripture that talks about this. You need to bring things out of the darkness into the light. You're having difficulty. And parents are notorious for this because they're embarrassed. They don't want anybody to know. And here's another thing. It's easier to pay my psychology group to come to one of my counselors at $140 an hour than to talk to your community who probably could help you more than I can. You with me? If you're in church, one of you would say amen, I'm sure. You need to engage your community. There is a place for outpatient counseling. We have really great Christ followers that are uniquely equipped to help you work through these adaptive challenges. I love them. It's a wonderful ministry. But you have friends and family members who are there to support you, and they can be a great resource for you. So this relational agility is the ability to understand how to share this burden together, and also to have this, this unique ability to understand your parent power equation. What is your style and what are you doing? You need feedback. And you need to not tell people they're wrong. So the worst thing you can do is ask somebody for feedback and say, I don't agree. Well, then why'd you ask me? Right? Don't ask. That's what people do. So please ask and then listen. It's that whole get it and believe it thing. You get it, you hear the feedback, but I'm not doing that. Yes, you are. You have a red vein that pops in your head right here every time you're mad. You know? And then when that thing goes, they actually have research out in Seattle. It's called the Seattle Love Lab. John Gottman and his team. They have there's a little thing that quivers on a man's lip when he's about to blow. Have you guys heard this? It's fascinating. They put video record couples and they put them in the lab for a weekend and they wire them up to things. And they can predict over a 90% rate of divorce in families based on how couples fight. And one of the things they measure is a man's lip, and when it starts to quiver, he's going to blow. He's going to blow a gasket. You're so predictable. People know that, and you've got to ask for feedback. How am I doing? How did I do in that conversation? What could I do differently? Use your relational stakeholder relationships to help guide you, get feedback from one another. Do it have a debrief session every time you have a challenging conversation with your kids. And be brave enough and courage enough to hear the answers. Creative agility. One of the things I think that's missing most with parents is the ability to stop and think and be creative. If your kids are more creative than you are, they will get out of your window, right? I just saw this recently. Anybody seen this? Can you read what it says? It says, boxed water is better. So you guys know that I didn't believe it. Was anybody with me? When they started selling bottled water for $1, I said that will never work. What an idiot I am. Right? 10 years ago? How long ago was it? Does anybody know? When did that start? I thought it was the dumbest thing I'd ever seen. My sister bought it all the time. I'm like, you are an idiot. Just go to the tap. It's a booming industry. So the big problem with bottled water is the plastic containers that are in. It's killing all the seals out in the ocean. I see it on TV, right? Don't you? You know what I'm talking about? It's that non-biodegradable material. So I was talking to somebody the other day and they had this boxed water that's biodegradable and they're now marketing it. You're going to see it in the market pretty soon. It's a little more expensive because they haven't figured out there's only one place over in Europe somewhere where they make these. Somebody got creative. They said, you know what? This plastic is killing our planet. Why don't we put water in cardboard boxes? Boxed water is better. Simple, right? Why didn't you think of it? The same thing we say with this whole parenting idea. What are you doing to step back and think about your parenting role more creatively? The two key competencies in this are reflective judgment, that's reality testing. Can you call a spade a spade? Can you be honest and brutally honest about what's happening? And then do you have connective awareness? Can you start realizing that there's possibilities of different ways you can handle this situation? And as I said, you're all tired. You're tired, even tonight. You're sitting here and you're all starting to fall asleep on me, so I'm going to try to move this along quicker while I get to questions. You're tired and you aren't thinking, using your creative juices, what can we do differently? Here's one little tip I'll give you for tonight. The next time you're in an adaptive challenge situation with your child, say, if you were the parent, what would you do? Just try it. Now, they may say, I would give me what I want. Okay. All right. So how about this? Tonight I'll give you what you want. All right. And then tomorrow night and the next 4 nights, you give me what I want. And what they'll realize is they don't want to be in a quid pro relationship. They don't want to do this tit for tat kind of thing. But just engage the conversation. Turn the tide on them. Be mysterious. When parents are predictable, they play you like a violin. You're so easy. I had one session with a kid, that's no kidding, it's a true story. I was working with this 14 or 15-year-old and I was talking to him and he's like, I said, well, I probably should bring your parents in so we can kind of update them. He goes, okay. Watch this, Dr. McKinley. He goes, I can get my dad upset in 30 seconds. And we're like betting each other like a ho-ho or something. I'm like, you cannot. I've met your dad. I'm serious, Dr. McKinley. I got it, you know. And so he and I have, this is terrible. I shouldn't tell you this. Not all therapists do this. So parent comes in, and sure enough, this kid, I don't even remember what he did, but in 30 seconds, the dad was screaming at him, got up, slammed the door, and walked out. And the kid just like, see? Isn't that cool? And the mom was like, what just happened? And I'm like, oh. You're so predictable. You're their form of entertainment. It's like that's how they amuse themselves. Stop being so predictable. Do something different. Change the game on them. You know, go into a different room. Talk to them with a Daffy Duck voice. You know, do something to break up the monotony of which they're controlling you. And that's what this creative agility is. The last one is self-leadership agility. And then I'm going to wrap up so we can have Q&A. Self-leadership agility, this is huge. I just got done reading a book on the Jesuit movement. I didn't grow up Catholic, but it's called Heroic Leadership. And I was just so moved by this book. And what it did is, the Jesuit movement, which is a movement from the Catholic order back in the 1450, this guy named Ignatius Loyola, right? His name is Ignatius Loyola, and he started this whole Jesuit movement, and they built the whole movement. The subtitle of the book is Lessons from a 450-Year-Old Company. They call themselves the Company of Jesus. They built this whole movement around 4 spiritual exercises. And I'm like, that's cool. I want to know what these are. And they sent these people out to China. We do mission trips we think are unsafe. These guys were crazy. They would go to China and they'd get beheaded and de-skinned, and then come back and more Jesuits would go. They were just unbelievably brave. Talk about adaptive challenges. And so they had 4 spiritual exercises, and the first one that they repeated over and over was self-awareness. If you are self-aware, it provides you with more choices. And you have to develop the competency of self-awareness. And here's the tool. Self-awareness is just literally the ability to see yourself. What is your motivation? What's driving you to act and do what you're doing right now in the moment? Pay attention to those things and move away from being that person, in terms of a judgment or a static, and shift to a possibility of being different in terms of your self-awareness. It's a very important, it's emotional intelligence is what it is. You've heard that term. Emotionally intelligent people are very self-aware, and as they become more enlightened to what they look like and how they show up, they have more choices in how they interact with others, and especially in the parenting realm. All right, so those are the 4 context. I kind of defined these already. Let me get to the last slide. In order for your teen motivation to work, your adolescent needs to feel that he has choices and some control over their own life. One of the things that parents take away because of their lack of agility is a sense of choices and control. One of the early techniques that most parenting books will teach you is give children choices. You know it, right? Especially those with young kids. Okay, you either clean up the spot right there, or you have to go to your room. Or you can't keep playing, or whatever. You eat the peas, or you don't get the ice cream. It's just decisions. You give them decisions. The problem is parents won't let kids make bad decisions. I'm not talking about unsafe ones, but bad decisions. Let them make the bad decisions so they can experience what it feels like to make a bad decision. Have any of you ever not made a bad decision? That's how we learn from our mistakes. 96% of the time in life, we're forced to change. 4% of the time, we change by our own volition. Change occurs because there's a pressure, an outside pressure for us to do something different. So, I don't have time to go through that. A man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. Your kids are no different. Your job is not to break their will. You're not trying to make them comply to what you're doing. You want to facilitate development in them.